Yeah, we're live.
Last time ऐसे हुआ था ना शिवा?
Live दिखा रहा था.
लाइव भी दिखा रहा है.
Come, Zain, start.
I'm here. I'm trying to see if it's live. Yes, sorry about that. We thought we were live. We spoke for a good 15 minutes. Oh wait, it's live on my phone. Yes, we thought we were live. We were speaking for a good 15 minutes before we realized that there was a glitch. It was showing streaming from my end, but wasn't necessarily showing up on YouTube. So here we are again. Anand's just joining us.
Alright, let's do it.
Sorry about that. Sorry for the delay.
All good.
We'll try and be on better time next time. Okay, Anand, just jumping back, start straight back into it.
Right. I
You
don't
were
even
at
know what
IFP
you're
last
talking
week.
about. Yeah. So no, that was great. I think a lot of people who are tuning in here.
Were any of you at IFP last week?
I think some people were because a lot of people who came and met me at the at my session did mention that they do tune in for our live sessions. So a lot of frequently asked questions popped out, and I was like, it was good to see the energy and the enthusiasm and the it was absolutely incredible. It was electric to see so many young people with so many ideas, and I must say that increasingly better ideas. That's also true. But one thing that kept coming
Normally,
up
people who have done few things in life have this habit of saying, "Ke, sorry about that."
that our generation was
Ke,
better.
our generation was better.
Yeah, which I find so annoying. Really, I mean, in fact, somebody did. There was like a slightly older person, not older, like older than the
Audience.
who did come up to me and said, "This generation does not do this, that. They are just like so ADD." And I'm like, which generation was better?
Wasn't, yeah.
Yeah, which generation was any better? There's this, apocryphal piece of message or letter that is usually thought to have been Aristotle or Socrates or something, and which basically
The
says
next generation is useless, is devoid of any thought.
they're devoid of any thought, any thoughtfulness. They do not read. They do not participate in. They're not responsible and this and that. It's like 300 BC when that was written or something like that. So
Yeah.
So every passing generation feels that the next generation is any lesser, but which is not true at all. If anything, evidence suggests otherwise, and it did suggest otherwise. There were a lot of really good ideas in that room. But one question that kept coming up was, I have the script in my back pocket. I have created this show Bible. What do I do with it? Where do I go with it? That's a question that kept
Yeah,
coming
and
up.
there's so many people who are creating more and more, who are writing scripts, who are wanting to tell stories, who are experiences, and have learned from people who came before them how to tell stories that are native to them, that talk about their interiority, their experiences.
Which is the desire, right?
Yeah, but there's even with the internet blowing up, to be able to put the resources together to tell it well is still a tall order.
And I guess it's always going to be, because what we are essentially talking about is the ability to transmit all your experiences, insights, senses, sensations into words and into images that become somebody else's interiority, that go and start living in somebody else's mind.
Sure.
And that's a very, very large aspiration of transcendence, and that's why it's probably so seductive. That's why everyone wants to have a piece of it at some point, and that's why everyone is carrying a script in their back pocket these days. So I was like, what can I do for them? How can I really truly give them any valuable insight? So I wanted to know from you, what has your process been? I mean, I've known you for a decade now, but I don't want to presume that I've known your process. Many people have come and gone and touched our lives in this decade. But I've seen you evolve into a full-blown author and come into your own, and now you're celebrated globally for your authorship. What has your process been?
So my process for just being able to make things and constantly improve has multiple facets to it. The first one is that I've almost a compulsion to consume knowledge, non-fiction, to consume things which are not story driven necessarily on a daily basis. The app that I use the most on my phone is YouTube, and also on YouTube, I try and make the AI work for me. Anything that doesn't enrich my life, I downvote or unfollow. So I don't watch sitcom reruns. I don't watch song compilations. I just want to consume the best of non-fiction there is out there. There are approximately 40 YouTube channels that I've seen every video of.
What are these channels? Give a few names.
Again, the range varies. Everything from the mainstream of, let's say, Mark Rober, which is an engineering YouTube channel, to just things like Religion for Breakfast, which just talks about one thing, the history of religion.
Okay. What are the other channels that you fall back on?
I'll drop a bunch of them in the comments, but how stuff works is one of them. Lots of small channels that talk about one specific niche.
Where is Satyam?
Satyam is great. Again, one of the bigger ones out there.
Veritasium.
Veritasium, yes.
Veritasium,
I always I mix up the pronunciation too.
Yeah.
Two is I really try and break down what other people have done into why it works. For example, and 2 and 3 are in conjunction, so I'll give an example for both of them together. 3, I understand, I really value my peers, and more than that, I value my mentors. Now, all my friends, everyone who I hang out with on a daily and work with on a daily basis, it's cliche, but I don't necessarily. I want to make sure that I'm not the smartest person in the room, and the smartest is not an absolute. So when it comes to just game balancing, I know someone who's better than me. When it comes to narrative, when it comes to storytelling, I know someone better than me, and I make sure I fall back on their expertise, not blindly, but to a certain degree. When
in a curatorial way.
In a curatorial way. So when I have story ideas, I know that these 4 people are the people who will respond to my story ideas in a meaningful, enriching way, and I make sure I fall back on their opinion. And coming back to 2 and 3, I constantly make sure that the same people I'm falling back on, I see how they perform at work, what they are doing when they're creating things, and I try and break it down. Now, for example, 6 years ago, I wasn't necessarily the loudest person or even seen in the script meetings.
Right.
I was sitting in a corner just observing.
Right.
I didn't come from film studies or cinema as a background. I wasn't a cinephile by any order.
Right.
I didn't even have the strongest inclination to make cinema.
Right.
We were primarily a film studio.
Right.
But film, just another medium for me.
Right.
But when I saw everyone from you to Vinay to Khushbu to everyone else who we have collaborated with, talking about film, breaking down films that they had seen in a particular way, constructing scenes, constructing stories, responding to each other's story in particular, I kept absorbing what they are looking for.
Right.
Of course, to which I did what works for me as a storyteller. And the process was just looking at people who I knew had more to offer and absorbing everything I could voraciously. Now I can confidently say that I can sit in a script meeting with people who were my mentors and contribute more than meaningfully.
Nice. So peer review and even passive mentorship wherever possible. And that's something that we're trying to do through these conversations, because I feel guilty for not doing enough, not giving enough of my time to mentor young creators and create systems rapidly enough. And this is just one of the small ways of putting whatever we can out there and giving everyone some kind of a window to spending time with us.
And there's a small audience that's tuning in every day. That's great.
And peer review is extremely important. I mean, a lot of young people who are asking me what can they do with these scripts they have, can they go and pitch it to OTT platforms? One thing I did at IFP, which was fun. There are a lot of young people who had gathered around, and I asked them to start sharing the best scene they had in their story with each other. And some really good scenes were being shared out at one point. You know, like somebody shared a scene that I think was quite creative, and another person then shared a scene that I thought managed to distill a very complex commentary on on pragmatism, religious prejudice, and economic wisdom, and the balancing factors that economic pragmatism and religious prejudice are to each other, or how economic pragmatism almost takes privilege over religious prejudice.
It's that poem that you keep reciting.
Yeah, that's Saxena's poem, Goli Khane Ke Baad. So I was like, that was good to witness that there were that young people are able to now take extremely complex social commentary and weave them into or complex personal experiences and weave them into scenes that are intuitive and speak intuitively. But the desire to just make your show viable into a show is so high today, because again there are lots and lots of young people who see that happening every day, who see that their peers have managed to kind of get through. And one thing that I also feel on that front, especially in this region, it's almost like a lottery system. There is no rule of thumb. The execs are not necessarily very well equipped with being able to curate or navigate through the amount of work that gets submitted to them, or even be able to necessarily comprehend complexity on paper and imagine how it will translate to cinematic motion picture work. So that there are tons of challenges over there. So how do young people navigate these challenges is the question that is being asked over and over again, I think.
Sure. And you started by talking about peer groups. So again, circling back to that, it's important for you to find mentors, passively or actively, peers who you can bounce your ideas off and who can help you fine-tune, improve and build upon your ideas. And if that's what someone is looking at you for, to give feedback, I would give two advices from very very personal experience. One is be kind to them. Don't necessarily pull them down for the sake of being pulled down, but simultaneously, more importantly, while you're being kind to them, don't forget to not be truthful. That's the most important thing.
And it's an impossible balance to strike. I mean, it's
something everyone struggles with, but that's what you should aspire to.
Yeah. I mean, we grew up with each other. We were fortunate to find each other, and again, finding peers is not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah.
I mean, most people can't find friends who are not necessarily going to be collaborators even very easily, and finding companions who are collaborative, who would enrich and inform your worldview, your craft is an incredibly difficult thing to discover. So even the basic tools of finding a peer is go reach out to young people, go reach out to people of your. It's easier if it's your generation. It doesn't really have to be always, but it's much easier if it's people of your generation. And you can reach out to people whose ideas resonate with you, even in the slightest, even when you feel that there is something that this person said or did when you ran into them, or they put something out on social media, on their YouTube channels. I mean, back in my time, I mean, I'm saying back in my time as if, but back in the late 90s, it used to be theater. Theater was our social media in that sense. That was our
the town square where everyone met.
Where everyone met and everyone kind of put out their ideas, and that's how you got to know what young people are, what people of your generation are also thinking at that time, and that's how, I mean, and short films was another, of course. Short films was just beginning to arrive.
Yeah, but digital arrived like around the time of Right Here Right Now.
Right Here Right Now was really one of the first digital short films in the region, and through Right Here Right Now, I met peers who have stayed on for my entire life. I mean, because of Right Here Right Now, I met Khushbu, I met Pankaj, and eventually met Vinay because of Right Here Right Now mainly, and then because while we were making Continuum, Khushbu and I met Chaitanya. So these are peers that we found, we discovered while we were making things, in the process of making things. So that's the other way of doing things. It's to start making them. It's to start really finding tools of expression and finding peers who will start collaborating with you, and through that a natural filtering process will kick in. You will start finding people who resonate with you, who resonate with your curiosity, who resonate with your inquiry, and who are willing to kind of give and take insights and tools and share their toolkit with you. Look out for be generous, look out for generosity. You don't want necessarily peers at an early stage who are not generous with their toolkits. You don't want to keep secrets.
By generous with toolkit, Anand means you have a trick in your bag of how to construct a scene, for example, and because it's taken so long for you to arrive at it, you want to hold on to it because that's your baby, that's your discovery. That's great, I understand that. But what's more important is taking your toolkit and sharing with 3 other people in the hope that they will share their toolkit with you.
Right.
Now you have 4 tools in your kit.
Right. And also, we learned it the hard way. All of us learned it the hard way. But we did subject each other to brutal critical review incessantly.
Yeah.
Sometimes that became too brutal and that became emotional and that became personal even. And that I would definitely recommend that you must learn to avoid at all costs.
So that's what we're getting at. Be kind, but be truthful.
Yeah.
It's an almost impossible balance to strike.
Yeah, absolutely.
But be truthful.
But be truthful to yourself, even more important.
Yeah.
If somebody's work does not resonate with you, somebody's ideas are not resonating with you, you don't need to really say it for the sake of it. You don't need to kind of earn an intellectual brownie point necessarily. So you be truthful to yourself. If you feel that, you'd have intuition that should be useful and you need to keep training that intuition.
And simultaneously, if something did work for you emotionally, conceptually, but might be otherwise lowbrow for your tastes, don't pull it down because you are a cinephile. Because
if something resonates with you,
be true to what Anand said.
Yeah, exactly. If something resonates with you, and if something that your peers have done, even in part, resonates with your curiosity, with your insight, with your framework, let them know. Let them know why it worked for them. Break it down, deconstruct. Also, be very, very meaningful with language.
I was just going to say that.
It's an incredible toolkit.
Yeah.
Language is fast disappearing. We have memes. We have motion picture. We have videos to communicate through. We have all kinds of new. We have virtual reality
and
games,
very soon like brain-computer interfaces.
So soon enough, language will not necessarily remain the most important tool for us to transmit our interiority.
But by language, you don't necessarily mean words. Language could even be cinematic language. Language could be any kind of construct.
Well, I was talking in this particular context. I was talking about natural human languages, which is languages as we know it.
Spoken
but you are right.
Yeah.
I mean, mathematical language, cinematic language.
Yeah.
You need to be careful about all of that. But spoken language, especially because that's our easiest and fastest and probably cheapest way of communicating.
And be specific. Be generous with your vocabulary. Be generous with your words. When someone asks you, "How do you like that?" It was cool. It's great.
But not useful.
Be specific.
It's not useful to say it's interesting. It's not useful to say it's cool. It's not useful to even say it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
It's not,
or I didn't like the vibe of it.
Or I didn't like the vibe of it. I somehow it didn't work for me. What is that somehow? What didn't work for you? You have to be for your own sake. Forget the other.
It works both ways. Articulation. It works for them, but more importantly, it works for you because then you know what works for you.
Yeah.
And then you question what actually works for you.
Yeah, and then break down the meaning of every word, deconstruct the meaning. Just completely clean it off its popular usage. Don't use generic words like interesting, creative. They don't mean much. Content. I mean, they don't mean much because these are very, very large buckets. These are extremely large buckets that are all inclusive. So they don't mean much. So you need to really look at a word, break it down, deconstruct it, look at its popular usage, look at its historical usage, try and understand what meanings that the word has are most relevant to you, most important to you, most significant to you. Use that particular meaning. Qualify the word with that meaning. In fact, every time you use a word that could be misunderstood, qualify it. Say that this is the word I'm using, but what I mean to say by using this word in this context is this. So that's where you want to learn to how to use words. You also want to learn to how to critically review each other's work, because that's going to really help you personally. It's going to help you look out for what really sticks, what really matters. This was more creative, this was more enjoyable, this was more entertaining. These are all subjective terms that don't have any meaning whatsoever. They have no utility.
Yeah, one thing that you had mentioned years ago was that there were, it's again dying art form, very few international film critics whose reviews you would consume a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's rarer and rarer. It's been extremely rare to kind of find good film scholarship.
Yeah.
And Andre Bazzi, of course, was a revolutionary moment in film review and film criticism. And just imagine, from that film scholarship came 4 young film critics, film students, who revolutionized cinema. Godard, Truffaut, Chabrol, Romer. These 4 were really just film reviewers sitting in a cafe talking about film all day long, and went on to bring the new wave, the French new wave, and
But that's not always the case. A good critic is not always a good creator.
not necessarily, almost not most of the time. But it for a good creator, I think it's almost necessary to be able to understand and fill up the gaps of data using a very, very informed intuition. So your own process, I mean, coming back to, and we will keep going back and forth. Why don't you talk about rigor in design, in game design especially? What does rigor mean in game design?
Rigor in game design just means showing up at a design table every day, hoping that you don't have to kill your favorite part of the game, but being okay with the fact that you'll have to. And then ending up doing it. So we make games, and we make games in a very collaborative space. I'll propose an idea, we'll try it out, and the idea will work for me. But it might not necessarily work for someone else, or work for my audience more specifically. It might not necessarily translate it. Or in the third playthrough, it might not invoke the same emotions I wanted to invoke. For me, rigor is being able to look at an idea not personally. Not in a way that, hey, this is my idea, I love it, I think it's a cool invention. Is just looking at the idea at its face value.
You mean through evidence?
Not through evidence, but just not judging where the idea came from, who it came from, what is the
Social or political context with
social, political, or what is the lineage of the idea evolving.
Right.
Just saying, does this in the current form work? If it doesn't, scrap it, throw the paper away, start again.
Right. So that's one step in the rigor.
Yeah.
I can clearly see that. But the
Second, what we do is we also play a lot of games.
Right.
I've had the fortune of playing games since I was 3 years old. It's been almost 3 decades of gaming.
Right.
And by games, I don't mean like playing in the park. I mean like constructed games,
Right.
from video games to board games.
Right.
And every time I play a game, or I play a game with my colleagues or friends in office, we sit down at the end of the game after every playthrough, talk about what worked, what didn't work, what was new, what was exciting, what was old and stale, and we document it.
So what do these concepts mean? Like, what does old mean? Like, see, here's the thing, right?
Sure.
And this is a question that keeps getting asked over and over again, in writing as well. That tropes exist.
Yeah.
Tropes exist because human behavior hasn't changed much in the last
Sure.
250,000 years.
Yeah.
Forget the last 4,000 or the last 100 years even. Since the birth of cinema, since the birth of literature, to now, human behavior is more or less the same. What has changed, what has probably changed, and that too changed at still a surface level, is the context within
Sure.
which it's
Exactly.
it's transpiring. We're still living in times when in the last few centuries, increasingly, there are times where we are industrious as a species, times when increasingly more and more human beings have the wherewithal or the access to tools of survival, tools of opportunity, tools of education, tools of enlightenment even, and that is ever so growing constantly. At least the aspiration is to keep that growing, and at the same time there are wars, at the same time there is political conflict, at the same time there is conflict between different kinds of worldviews and peoples and groups of people and their boundaries. At the same time there is loneliness. There are 7 billion human beings today on the planet, and the loneliness that humans have experienced hasn't changed. The framework within which loneliness and romance happen haven't changed in the last since the dawn of human species.
Really?
I mean, there's Tinder, there is easier access to finding your mating partners, but that doesn't really necessarily work in a way that completely does away with. So there are human behaviors that are consistent. There are certain human behaviors and frameworks that are consistent, and as a result of which, tropes
exist.
are bound to work. Tropes exist.
Yeah, but again, the context matters.
And the cadence matters.
And the cadence matters, the context matters. I'll give you two examples. One is an example of something we spoke about in the last conversation. Your hero is about to die, and the hero's friend, normally a person of color, comes and takes the bullet.
Right.
Now, I never liked the trope, but the trope worked at a particular time where society was working towards being more
assimilation,
being more inclusive of more kinds of people.
Right.
And that's and
that's the majority's view of the minority.
Exactly.
That the minority has utility.
What's the term for that? It's a model minority.
It's a model minority.
Yeah.
And that's a majoritarian view of the minority. That minority will of course come around in times of war and times of conflict.
Yeah. So if I see the trope now in a film, I understand it's a trope.
Right.
But it's an old trope. It doesn't necessarily work anymore.
Right.
Even the reversal of that trope.
So what I say very often in context of tropes is that you have to earn it.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to create a narrative thesis. Scene after scene, you have to build up a case for that moment to happen naturally. That moment to be the only moment that can happen.
And that narrative, yeah.
At that moment in the film or screenplay. One of my favorite examples is, lighting something on fire, lighting a car, or lighting a house on fire,
and walking away,
and walking to the camera.
Yeah.
The hero. I mean, if you want to do this, you can't just suddenly show up. You can't have a scene that suddenly shows up, and you can't even have a scene that somewhat justifies the action. No, you need to really create a case for this. I wanted to do this scene in Tumbad, and we seeded it all the way from the beginning. Slowly seeded this moment where Vinayak can actually put the house on fire and walk away from it. So you have to really earn tropes. You have to rephrase them, reconstruct them, reimagine them, and contextualize them within your worldview, within your own framework, so that you can use them in a way that it doesn't feel stale.
Yeah. The second, in games, and tropes are mechanic structures, or mechanisms. One trope is, and it's a very famous genre of games called a worker placement game. You place a worker, you take an action. You are normally the owner of a vineyard or a farm or a plantation or something of that sort. And you place a worker and you take an action. The question we asked, that I asked and Abhishek asked while making Azadi is, this worker that is being placed on the board, what is their life like? And the answer that emerged, that the worker is my ancestor. The worker is me.
Exactly. Yeah.
And those workers in those games were bonded labor, were slaves. In some cases, explicitly mentioned as slaves. And the game wasn't doing it in a way to. Games can use this to talk to you about the complex systems under which slavery works, or the failures of economic systems of the past or human rights of the past. But no, these games are normally just talking about slavery as a tool, as a thing that happened, and
they're fine with it.
They're fine with it. There's no commentary.
They're like, okay, you are the lord, and you can now use them.
Who is the better lord who deploys their slaves in a more efficient way? That is the story.
That's the game. Yeah, because the games are still using voices that have been mainstream voices for centuries now, and now finally we are probably at a place where an age-old monologue could become a dialogue.
Exactly. And so when we are looking at games and looking at what's fun and what's exciting, we're also looking at what's old, and this is what I define by old.
Right. Stale not only in trope, but stale also in worldview.
Exactly. Like draw a card, play a card.
Right.
The oldest trick in the book.
Right.
Not necessarily a bad trick.
Right.
We just finished a game that has the exact mechanic, core mechanic.
Right.
You draw a card and you take a card.
Right. The new game that we have.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And likewise, I mean, in film, I say this all the time. What I would like to say is, this is something that I've said in the past. There's this Banksy graffiti that I once read that really resonated with me. I've been using this as an so all artists are willing to suffer for their work. We see that day in and day out. There's artists are willing to wear a rebellious ribbon and just go through the fire of suffering of being an artist. Like that's something that we see actually more often than one would imagine. Most people imagine that they are the only ones, but it's way more common than one would imagine. There is so much literature around the romance of being the one who's misunderstood, the one who has not been given their due space. And
as a matter of fact, if you're an artist and you don't struggle, there's something off. You're not really. Are you really an artist?
That's what's asked. I mean, again, what's asked of us over and over again is that why don't we ever hear stories of your struggle? And there are other forums where I mentioned why I don't think that it's my right or necessity.
Yeah, but commit the quote.
Yeah. So all artists are willing to suffer for their work, but very few are willing to learn to draw. Now, for me, that's really the diagnosis of the pandemic.
Yeah.
That rigor is harder than divine insight. Rigor, we have an incredible case study for that, which is Srinivasa Ramanujan. Ramanujan had insight, and he imagined, at least he experienced it this way. He experienced that these insights were coming to him from his goddess, from his community goddess, who would come to him in his dreams and literally just read out mathematical formulae, and he would show up with these incredibly vast, complex mathematical insights. And G.H. Hardy, his mentor, started insisting that he needs to prove them. He needs to prove them with rigor, and he always thought that that's a waste of time. He's had divine insight, and this has come straight from his goddess. Why does he really need to waste time?
Proving it.
Years sometimes proving it. And thankfully, G.H. Hardy was around to kind of explain to him and mentor him through that process, and explain to him how important rigor is along with intuition. So this balance is almost missing. We see a lot of intuition, and we see a lot of I see especially a lot of young people who come to me. I see a lot of intuition. I see a lot of confidence increasingly on their insights. That we have this divine insight, and now I really need to just give it to the world. I need to gift this insight to humanity, and that should be sufficient because I had it. Whereas what you said, that there is an evidence-based process of proving, you need to go through, you need to now take this insight, take this intuition, which is really just the art of filling up gaps in data that the world has presented to you. What is an insight? An insight is a framework that fills up gaps in existing data sets, in existing information systems.
Joins the dots.
And joins the dots, basically. You have these, think of data as these dots on a page. And insight is the ability to join these dots in a way that a shape emerges, that a meaning emerges, right? So you have this insight, you have this intuition, and then now you've just put it out. But you need to join the dots. You need to prove that dots can be joined. You need to prove that cause X leads to consequence Y, or a certain behavior emerges from a sum total of these kind of contextual causes coming together, these kind of actions coming together, these stimuli working together create a certain recipe that comes to a certain meal that tastes in this manner. So you need to work that out rigorously. You need to work that out step by step in a way that makes logical sense, because you want immersion at the end of the day. You want audience immersion.
And again, if you were to even break it down, great that you have intuition, right?
Yeah.
But one, how do you translate it? And two, so does everyone else.
Yeah.
Why are you privileging yourself just because of who you are, or where you, or the experience you have had? That's great.
Yeah.
I keep saying this. If you're 1 in a million, there's 7,500 of you,
right,
in the world out there.
Right. So that's the other thing. A lot of authors here, not just me, a lot of authors who have put their work out, hear it from a lot of people. A lot of people come up to authors and say, you know what you wrote? I was thinking exactly that, and that's true. Because that's one piece of authorship is to, of course, provide new frameworks.
Yeah.
Another part of authorship is to validate your intuition.
Or to articulate articulate a framework that many people hold.
Exactly. And that process of validating, that process of going from intuitively experiencing something, feeling something, getting a sense of something and rigorously putting it in words, rigorously putting it in a framework
In the best possible form.
that makes intuitive sense, that engages you, is all the work there is. So yes, of course, when I make a film, when I everyone comes up to us and says, everyone that we have spoken to at least come up to us and say that that thing that you said in Tumbad, exactly what I felt. Like that character spokenship of teachers, I say it all the time.
Yeah.
Which is of course the intention. A part of the intention is to validate your experience, your and a part of it is to transmit my interiority into your body, into your mind, and expand your consciousness, hopefully expand your sense of self with that, and there'll be pieces that resonate, there'll be pieces that will extend and augment your reality, your life through that. And of course that's why it's such a seductive process to become an author. But at the same time, most amount of work, if you ask me what am I doing in the 5 years, the 6 years that leads up to that moment where I can actually share that piece of work, those 5 years are only and only about rigorously qualifying every word, every moment, every image. Nothing can be accidental in that space.
And basically that's what Banksy means by learning how to draw.
Yeah, it's a rigorous process. It's like
Suffering mein romance hai, but that's
I mean, and that's exactly what it is. It's
Yeah.
just romantic. What's the value of that suffering? Especially if you're
every
saying that-
banker, every accountant, every engineer
Yeah.
goes through pain.
Yeah, everyone's
What makes the
single.
artist different?
What makes the artist so much more important and their suffering so much more privileged? And
The difference is that we've been able to articulate it because we are in the business of articulation.
yeah, that's your job. I mean, the reason the community provides me this ability to come and speak to you, the reason that we live in this wonderful space that we have been fortunate to find, the reason the community has granted us this life is because we perform that job. We perform the job of creating wonder, of articulating wonder,
Yeah.
of making wonder accessible to all. That is your job. So I mean, you can't privilege your suffering as an artist over the suffering of anybody else, and especially not over the suffering of people that you are actually supposed to represent or validate.
Yeah. Having said that, it's also important to just keep practicing, keep creating. For example, we wanted to do this exact set of conversations 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
But the same philosophy that we apply to our films and our games and everything else we do, which is let's make it perfect. Let's craft every word, every moment, every cut. Doesn't necessarily translate to us
This
having,
medium even.
us having a conversation. So we decided that let's not do that.
And also, I mean, a lot of people do want to come and be a part of Nemesis.
Sure.
There are so many young people out there, and I feel that time is passing. I mean, each passing year since we have started Nemesis, we've been wanting to grow this into a large-scale institution that can host and mentor thousands of students of life. But we have not yet been able to do that. We will get there soon enough, and we'll get there sooner than later. But right now, this is the best we have to offer, that we can at least in the meantime give you a glimpse of, and it's not much, I know, but it's a glimpse of, a very superficial glimpse at that perhaps, of our internal processes at Nemesis.
Let's see if there are any questions that we need to respond
There must
to.
be some questions.
You guys should play Disco Elysium. Yeah, Game of the Year. It's amazing. Insight on sustainability.
Are there any questions that we want to take on right now, or we can take them later in the next
Take
one?
them later.
Also, we have a meeting to attend.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we do actually.
Awesome.
Okay, all right, great. Thanks for joining in,
Thank
and
you.
we'll talk
See you around.
very soon. Hopefully.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Take care. We have a meeting in 20 minutes.